What do you think about Spider-Man caught on? Do you think it was really just the I can relate to this guy aspect of it?
I think there were a lot of reasons. I think perhaps the main reason was the I can relate to him. Because he was shy, he wasn't that successful with girls, he had to worry about his family. I think most teenagers reading it thought to themselves, hey, that could be me, you know. So there certainly was that identification.
Spider-Man, I love that people are having a collective escapist experience.
Stan Lee says that the reason why Spidey is so popular is because all of us can relate to him, and I agree. I needed Spidey in my life when I was a kid, and he gave me hope. In every comic I read, he was living out mine and every skinny boy's fantasy of being stronger, of being free of the body I was born into, and that swinging sensation of flight.
I honestly would play Spider-Man until, like, I can't walk anymore. I love this character so much, and it was, like, my childhood dream to play this character. And, you know, I'm loving it, I'm really enjoying it, I'm really loving what we can do with this movie and the people that we can kind of touch and the amazing things we're able to do with the platform that this movie gives us.
The kid in that photo with the Spider-Man shirt, Spider-Man VHS behind him, and Spider-Man toy in hand is me, sadly. The kid in this Spider-Man shirt on the motorcycle is also me. And the kid incorrectly beating Spider-Man's brain in is also me. While being a tad embarrassing, I can't deny the fact that Spider-Man has always been there in my life. Every version of Spider-Man. One of the first memories I can properly place a visual to is my father walking me into the theater and the entry door being filled with stickers promoting Spider-Man 2. I was around 2 and I somehow can remember that visual. I remember seeing The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 with my middle school friends. I also remember the news that Sony and Marvel came to an agreement to put Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War. I also remember seeing that movie opening night with my grandma. You see, I have a direct story connecting myself to every single Spider-Man movie that's come out since 2004, and with No Way Home, it's not any different. Other than maybe Endgame, I've never been so excited for a movie. Maybe the movie is gonna be hot garbage and prove that Sony never learned their lesson about cramming too much into one. But, to their credit, they've also shown that they can make a Spider-Man movie with a lot going on seem hyper-personal and push forward a genre that for better or worse refuses to slow down. Regardless of what No Way Home becomes or what impact it has on that character's legacy, I know what Spider-Man means to me, and I know what it means to so many others, and why he is an iconic character that will outlive myself and will outlive other superheroes that fall in and out of relevance. Because of that, I've made this video. It's a new type of video for me, but one that is extremely personal, and it gives me a platform to talk about what makes this character different from the 70 other superhero properties currently being produced. It's a video essay, but not really, because I don't have a grand statement I'm trying to justify. I'm not spewing words from a thesaurus in the hopes of sounding smarter either. I'm not dropping clickbait hot takes. The goal of this video, as you saw from the title, is just to appreciate every version of Spider-Man that's been on the big screen. I didn't know how to organize this video, and whether to go movie by movie, Spider-Man by Spider-Man, or something else. And in the end, I came to 3 words that personify Spider-Man, and decided to make each one of them represent a specific era of his big screen presence. Obviously, every version of the character shows the 3 traits I'm going to talk about, but I believe each one focuses on a specific one more than the others. And please keep in mind, I don't know every Spider-Man fact ever. A lot of this is my opinion. I've not read every Spider-Man comic ever, and I'm not here to pick the best Spider-Man actor. Now, as I said before, I've never done one of these videos, so the edit may be a bit wonky. I might stumble on a word or two, and the transitions might be a bit abrupt. Tobey Maguire's take on Peter Parker, full of sentimental dialogue, Sam Raimi's unabashed willingness to just create stuff that is clearly his vision, is why for a whole generation, Tobey Maguire is the Spider-Man. And there's a reason this series' popularity has prospered compared to other Marvel properties of the same generation. Each voiceover at the beginning or end of these films feels like a thought bubble that Stan Lee, Dan Slott, or Brian Michael Bendis would write, perfectly illustrating the core beliefs of this character. And you know, growing up as a little kid, scenes like this...
Back to formula.
And this... scared me tremendously. But those scenes juxtaposed to scenes like this... and this... created a distinct tone that growing up and even now, no other superhero franchise has been able to recreate. Sam Raimi understood the campiness of a character like Spider-Man and juggled the many tones a character like that and his villains bring. Not only this, but Sam Raimi makes New York feel like a character that Peter is constantly interacting with and makes you, as an audience member, feel invested in the specific city, opposed to other superhero movies now, where the city can be replaced with any other. But above all, he understood the weight that would come with being given extraordinary gifts. While that is focused on every single Spider-Man movie ever created, and most superhero movies ever created, a lot of them do not do it as good as the Sam Raimi trilogy. I think that's because after every single larger-than-life battle, he's not afraid to slow down. The scenes involving Peter's personal life feel like they have stakes just as important as every action sequence. Yes, the movies are about Spider-Man, but by placing scenes like this...
I missed him a lot today.
And then this... you don't forget Peter's fatal mistake that affects every action he takes in the whole series. It's constantly there in a way that the others just don't allow because they have more to set up. It helps that Cliff Robertson brings such a realistic portrayal to Uncle Ben, and it's a warm, gut-wrenching portrayal that hasn't been matched since. It helps that he doesn't have to do it alone, though, as Aunt May throughout the series is given these beautiful monologues that could have easily gone in the direction of corny. Rosemary Harris, though, with every single line, it feels like a warm hug from your grandma, and it's constantly there to remind Peter,
With great power comes great responsibility.
just so much passion oozes out of this original series. The connection between Mary Jane and Peter is written awkwardly and corny at times, but it's realistic and I can't help but smile when I watch it. That's how I feel about most of this series, even the parts that don't work as well. Yet I don't feel I'm blinded by nostalgia, as a lot of YouTube will try to make you believe. I truly believe each of these films have something amazing in them, and it all goes back to responsibility. In the first one, Uncle Ben is the catalyst that makes Peter pursue a life as Spider-Man, as he is in most of the comics. Along the way, Aunt May gets hurt, Norman dies, and Harry ends up permanently scarred. By the end of the first movie, and by the way, one of the best fights in any superhero movie, the idea of great responsibility is earned, and not just a phrase taken from a comic book. He realizes that with this life, he's putting the life of everyone else he loves at risk, in a way future Spider-Man haven't reached yet. The second movie, possibly the best Spider-Man movie ever made, again deals with responsibility, and somehow finds a way to make it even more relatable.
Pizza time.
The first movie was all about learning what your responsibilities are as you go from a high schooler to an adult. The second movie, however, deals with what happens when the responsibility, adulthood, becomes too much. Peter struggles with performance issues, work issues, relationship issues, and pushes away the responsibility his uncle instilled in him.
No, Uncle Ben. I'm just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man. No more.
It's not until this equally incredible speech
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble, and finally allows us to die with pride.
That he's reinvigorated and can help Dr. Octavius recognize the great power he has corrupted him. The first movie focused on how responsibility can affect those around you, while the second movie dives further into what it can do to your mental health. The third movie uses the symbiote to corrupt Peter in a similar way to the arms with Dr. Octavius. Spider-Man 3, the worst of this series, is all about forgiveness, yet its foundation set up in Spider-Man 1 and 2 is still enriched with responsibility. While the second movie saw Peter push away his power, the third movie is about the corruption of power, and it doesn't just come from the symbiote. Even before the symbiote, you can see Peter's ego consuming him, and him constantly making every conversation with MJ about him. The black suit doesn't change him, it just amplifies what he could become. And it makes sense because we saw him go from a nerdy kid with one friend to...
I don't know, I guess I've become something of an icon.
By the end of the movie, he realizes that you always have a choice to be the best version of yourself. And he takes accountability for every shitty thing he's done prior. He takes responsibility for his actions once more, and he gets an up-close look of how power can change you from inside out. He forgives the Sandman, and in doing so forgives himself. And I don't mind each of these films covering similar ground because they all do it from a different perspective. Responsibility isn't supposed to be easy. It's complicated, and these films, despite the over-the-top action, paint a realistic portrayal of how it affects not only yourself, but everyone around you in a way. The same way it's hard to not cover similar ground when making 9 Spider-Man movies, it's hard to not talk about similar things when discussing 9 Spider-Man movies. Resiliency is shown throughout every version, and every superhero really. Not even just superheroes, but protagonists in general show resilience at one point or another because every setback makes their inevitable victory that much more satisfying. However, and probably controversially, I believe Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man shows an amount of resilience that's not talked about enough when discussing Spider-Man. When looking for something to praise Andrew Garfield for, most jump to the quips, the swings, the suits, and the chemistry between him and Emma Stone. And while yes, all of that is great, and I'm definitely gonna talk about it, I need to talk about where it all began first.
It's true. Though his name may be new to many, those who have seen his work will know this young man embodies an exceedingly rare combination of intelligence, wit, and humanity. So, yeah, me too. Without further ado, meet your new Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield.
After the not-so-hot critical reception to the very crowded Spider-Man 3, Sony started from scratch, choosing Mark Webb from 500 Days of Summer to reboot the franchise with Andrew Garfield taking the reins. To help justify its existence and differentiate itself, The Amazing Spider-Man gave him his classic comic book web shooters, started him out with Gwen Stacy, and it took the attitude and physical components from the Ultimates comics and emphasized that his parents left him at a young age. You know, the series instantly starts him out with trauma from their mysterious disappearance doing spy stuff that would totally be S.H.I.E.L.D. but can't legally be S.H.I.E.L.D. because Sony and Marvel didn't like each other at the time. And you know, after the bug bite, his life only gets worse. Unlike the Raimi films, he never finds his uncle's killer, and I appreciate that. He instantly starts the series with a chip on his shoulder and feels he has untapped potential even before the spider bite. With no closure for his parents, no closure for his uncle, and Aunt May not serving as large a role as she did in the previous series, Gwen Stacy becomes his anchor. While the movie ends weirdly with him making a promise to Gwen's father and nearly instantly implying that he's gonna break it, it does set up some of my favorite parts of the sequel. You know, it sets up guilt, and it really does show how desperately he needs Gwen. The second movie, as stuffed as it is, I love scenes like this. So while that trauma is with every Spider-Man, I don't think a single one goes through a loss this traumatic. Now let's chill for a moment. That scene at the time is over 7 years old, and in the build-up to this movie, I remember everyone thought it could happen, but still, Sony having the balls to actually do it and cut Shailene Woodley out of the film to really focus on Gwen is kind of crazy. Emma Stone was one of the biggest actresses in the world, and she was a huge talking point when it came to The Amazing Spider-Man. Surely they were just gonna tease her death in a similar way to the first Raimi movie dropping Mary Jane off the bridge. No, she's dead. Like, for real gone. The second Amazing Spider-Man is a complicated movie, but at the end of the day, it's about closure and loss and what you're willing to do to keep what you love, and none of those things can come without resilience. The whole family subplot is just Peter trying to find closure and how their demons made him who he is. He doesn't want to lose Gwen in a similar way because she's all he has. Yet, in the end, he killed her. He lost his anchor again, and whether he broke her neck or not, he broke the promise to her father. Her death is on him. That's heavy, and that is Spider-Man. To go through something that is traumatizing and find a way to not give up. While most characters deal with that, Spider-Man does more than any to me. Whether it's an uncle, a girlfriend, a mentor, a marriage, a secret identity, his actual body to Doc Ock, no one loses as much as Spider-Man and still gets up. His girlfriend dying, but him finding the strength to return, that is resilience in a way that no other Spider-Man on screen has shown yet.
I knew you'd come back.
Yeah, thanks for stepping up for me.
Andrew Garfield, at the moment, is the most real live-action Spider-Man we've got. Him and the whole creative team found a way to make a new version of Spider-Man that is still true to that character all the way from 1962, where it counts. You know, it's clear to tell that he got screwed by Sony, as did Mark Webb. With the success of the MCU, other franchises tried to create shared universes quickly, and in most cases, for one reason or another, it failed. And you know, it's a shame reading about what happened to his love for the role slowly over time.
There's something about being that young in that kind of machinery, which I think is really dangerous. And I wasn't young. I wasn't a teenager, but I was still young enough to struggle with the value system, I suppose, of corporate America. Really, story and character were actually not top of the priority list ultimately.
Got it. Yeah.
And I found that really tricky. I signed up to serve the story and to serve this incredible character that I've been dressing as since I was 3.
Yeah.
And then it gets compromised and it breaks my heart.
But reading about The Amazing Spider-Man 3 makes me kind of glad we never got it. While I wish Andrew Garfield got a better end for that chapter of his life, and maybe he will, it's clear that a third Amazing Spider-Man wasn't that better ending. Sony was desperately trying to be different and create a universe that could rival the success of the Avengers, and because of it, the aura of Spider-Man was drained. They failed. However, Sony seemed to learn one lesson. If you can't beat them, YouTube is filled to the brim with much more credible people telling you that the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man is inherently flawed and he's not Spider-Man. And while I agree he's not perfect, none of the Spider-Men are perfect. He's a fictional character that changes writer to writer, therefore why wouldn't you want him to change director to director or actor to actor? If you want a version of the character that's closer to the sincerity of the original comics, there's 3 Raimi movies waiting for you. If you want a version of the character that has more of an edge, the Mark Webb 2 are out there. And there's also all of these animated shows that put a different version of Spider-Man out there. And there's also literally thousands of comics about him. The only thing that is important to me is that the fundamentals of who that character is are still there. And those fundamentals aren't things like, oh, he needs to create his web shooters. Oh, he needs to date blank girl first. It's not stuff like that that you could see on the outside, it's on the inside of what that character represents. And I believe that Tobey, Andrew, and Tom show that in different ways for each of them. For Tom and for the animated Into the Spider-Verse, they show it most through their individuality. Let's go back to the beginning again. I describe this video as, it's a new type of video for me, but one that is extremely personal, and it gives me a platform to talk about what makes this character different from the 70 other superhero properties currently being produced. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was in year 8 when Spider-Man made his grand appearance in Civil War. While people were ecstatic to see Spider-Man interact with the Avengers, a lot of people couldn't believe that in the span of 10 years, we had 3 different Spider-Man. The question was raised the same way it was raised for Andrew, of how do they change the formula again, and what makes this Spider-Man unique? There's the obvious skipping of the Uncle Ben stuff, Ned being his best friend, the Tony Stark mentorship, more tech-heavy suits, and a youthfulness that was lacking from the first 2, but there's a vocal minority online that still hate it. And that's fine, but from my perspective, the changes are much needed because of the youth in particular. He's not supposed to be in his element, and the Spider-Man everyone comes to expect throughout the Homecoming trilogy. Why do you think each of those 3 films get bigger and bigger in scale each time? He's a little fish in a big pond of superheroes. He's actually just a kid. Not like Tobey or Andrew, where they're clearly adults in a high school setting. He's still learning and evolving, and with each film he grows closer to what he's supposed to become. The greatest superhero in that universe. A lot of people hate the Tony Stark stuff, and I get it. I really do get it. But I find it interesting. The Homecoming films still focus on responsibility and resilience, but in a world full of heroes, his individuality is at the forefront. Throughout Homecoming, he desperately craves more and wants to be an Avenger. And a lot of people act like him doing good is just for the Avengers' approval, but Civil War shows that not to be true.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
That scene serves the same purpose as this scene.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And the same as this scene.
He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
The foundation is still there. He's still Spider-Man for the right reasons. He just recognizes that becoming an Avenger would be cool, which for a teenager still finding his place in a world full of heroes would be cool. That doesn't mean that he's nothing without Iron Man or he's Iron Man Jr. He created his web shooters himself, showing he's still a genius. He became a hero because he knows it's his responsibility. He, as the intro of Homecoming still states, is the underdog. And if there was any doubt, he loses the fancy suit in Homecoming and recognizes...
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it, okay? God, I sound like my dad.
A high-tech suit doesn't make him a hero, and the expectations of an Avenger don't either. He spends so much of that movie trying to be something he's not, before recognizing that he needs to watch out for the little guy. He becomes the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Then, outside circumstances ruin that, as it would in any Spider-Man comic. From there, obviously, the stakes get higher, and he goes through some insane stuff that never even seemed possible 5 years prior. That alone is a reason to appreciate this Spider-Man. There's a reason he is the final blow in that tragic ending. That scene works so well because of the youthfulness, the eagerness, and the underdog nature of that Spider-Man, of Tom Holland. And people clearly seem to agree. Far From Home showcases his individuality even more. He, like the Spider-Man before him, must persevere through loss and trauma and the enormous expectations at his feet. Like Spider-Man 2, like the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter just wants a break. Tony is dead and the world needs a new hero, but Peter doesn't think he can be the next Iron Man. People love to say that Tom Holland movies never show the struggle of being Spider-Man and Peter Parker and that it's a juggling act. But a lot of Far From Home is that juggling act. And I'm not trying to say his youth is an excuse for all the bad that these movies do, because I'll admit they're flawed movies. But I think it's made abundantly clear throughout these movies that he's not supposed to be the Spider-Man you know yet.
You know, I think it was midway through the first film, he graduated high school. The beginning of the second Mark Webb film, he graduated high school. And some of my favorite Spider-Man arcs and Spider-Man stories, he's in high school for a lot of it. And we want to explore that. That also makes him very, very different from any of our other characters in the MCU, which is something else we want to explore, is how unique he is when now put against all of these other characters.
I think it's clear that Far From Home is about self-belief and trust, and on rewatch that's obvious. He gets betrayed by Mysterio, and in a literal sense, he learns to trust his instincts through the Peter tingle. Yet throughout the movie, he has no self-belief that he can be the hero the world needs. He gives the glasses to Mysterio because of that self-doubt that watching his superhero mentor die left him. Peter associates being Spider-Man with being perfect. Perfect like Iron Man was to the world. We, however, we've seen the movies, and we know that Iron Man was deeply flawed and he had intense PTSD through everything. But to the world in the story, and even to Peter, Tony was
something of an icon.
He, despite the insanity that was Infinity War and Endgame, can still be Spider-Man. Him creating his own suit is a way of showing that. Now, would I like this Spider-Man to mention Uncle Ben every now and then? Yes. Would I like this Spider-Man to have bigger consequences and worse luck? Yes. Would I like the Aunt May stuff to be more impactful? Yes. But I believe in the journey, and I know they're building him up slowly, and I recognize that these movies still have good in them. They are not the worst thing of all time, like a lot of YouTube tries to make you believe. I don't mind getting to that end goal of what Spider-Man is on a longer, different path. The other paths have been seen, and I have faith that by the end of Tom Holland's run, we're going to be at the same destination, and it'll be all the better because of it. Hey, originally there was a whole sequence here about Into the Spiderverse. I cut it out. And that's not because I don't love the movie. It is definitely one of the best Spider-Man movies and one of the best superhero movies ever made, and all of the other hyperboles that people want to throw out about it. It truly is incredible, though. Like, I love that movie. But the video's already a bit long, and I don't want to just skim by Into the Spider-Verse. It deserves a whole video, and one day I'll make that. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the 3 live-action ones, I think. Now it's time to somehow wrap this huge audio recording I've just done up. If you can't tell, I love Spider-Man. The character has always served as a comfort character for me, and has personified those feelings of overwhelmedness and not fitting in that I felt for a long time growing up. The character, in every media, has always been a reminder to be a good person and be the very best version of yourself. I'm so excited for No Way Home. I'm so excited for Insomniac's Spider-Man 2. And I'm just forever indebted to a fictional character that's meant so much to myself and was always there. You know, I have memories of watching these films while on the phone with my mom when I was 6. I have memories of the first time I met Osmar. He said he liked Spider-Man more than me, and we talked about that from there. I have memories of giving my girlfriend Spider-Man comics to read during reading time in middle school because I didn't know how to start a conversation with her. I guess this video is a thank you. Or maybe it is a crappy video essay. You never know how the edit will turn out. Whatever it is, though, try to appreciate every version of Spider-Man. we're gonna see them all on screen very soon, and I will be there to talk about that afterwards. But just so much of the internet is filled with hate, and speaking in absolutes on who's the worst and who's the best, but there's nothing wrong with trying to be optimistic and appreciate different filmmakers trying different things. Thank you all once again. There's a video out every Friday for the rest of the month. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you're new, and let's hope No Way Home isn't complete shit.